we will call to order the Board of County Commissioners meeting for the purpose of a committee of the whole. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Schaefer. Commissioner Allen.
Here.
Commissioner Klicka is absent. Commissioner Osterhaus.
Here.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Here.
Commissioner Brown.
Here.
Commissioner Eilert.
Here. Mr. Schaefer just walked in, so we do have a quorum present. It's my understanding we have a decision point today, Mr. Reinhardt?
No, Chairman, informational.
All right, you got a mic? Always remember the green light has to be on.
I apologize. Commissioner Eilert, no, this is informational only. No action is anticipated.
All right, thank you very much.
All right. Good afternoon, Chairman Eilert and Commissioners. I'm Brad Reinhardt, Director of Facilities for Johnson County. I'm excited to be here today together with our Courthouse project team to present the schematic design for the new Johnson County Courthouse. As you are aware, we spent the latter half of 2017 identifying and documenting the programmatic requirements for the county's new courthouse. This information was handed over to our design build team that was brought in November, and since then they've been diligently working on the design of the new courthouse. So this first phase is schematic design, and the objective of the schematic design is to define the general scope, scale, functional relationship, site placement, and cost of the project components. The schematic design also includes further analysis and development of the structural systems, the mechanical systems, security, vertical transportation needs, analysis of the performance of the acoustics and energy, and daylighting analysis in addition. Exterior architectural renderings are typically created to convey the look and massing of the facility, and we have those to share with you today. The schematic design is documented in sufficient detail to convey a clear and comprehensive image of the designer's solution, and this is what we hope to accomplish with you today. So I'll begin by introducing the individuals who will be presenting to you today from the design team, and I might introduce a few other folks that are in our audience here as well. First, I'll begin with folks at the table. Rick Davidson with CGL Companies. CGL was our criteria consultant we've been working with over 2017. Jeff Lane with Trainer HL. Brian Chaffee with Fentress Architects. Craig Vickers with Civitas. And Kyle McQuiston with J.E. Dunn. And a few other folks I do want to introduce. Our project team, Dan Waymueller, our project manager, Danny Livingston in facilities also, our director of planning, design, and construction. I saw Kyle Heltney here, who's been instrumental on the north parking. I don't know if Kim is with us. Kim Morrissey, Deputy Director of Facilities. I see that Steve Howe, our District Attorney, is here with some of his staff and representatives from the Sheriff's Office. So hopefully I haven't missed anybody, but we have a large audience here, and this is a very important presentation. And our presentation will provide you insight on our design process, including how the site influences the design of the new courthouse building. We'll conclude with an update on schedule and budget and speak to the next steps and respond to any questions you might have at the end.
Okay.
So with that, I'll turn it over to Rick Davidson with CGL Companies.
Okay. Thank you, Brad.
Good.
Our role has been to assist the county with the development of the criteria document, which sets in place all of the county's requirements that the design build team is to utilize during their design. Very detailed approach. I'm going to go over that just briefly with you. Since 2013, there have been 9 kind of overarching goals that have been set for this project. They're listed on the monitors above and on your monitor, but I've highlighted 4 of these that really are the ones that stand out in the development of the criteria and that need to translate directly into the design that they're about to present. The first one is highlighted as the high-functioning, public service-oriented courthouse. We've envisioned this thing from the very beginning as one that focuses its ability to better serve the citizens of Johnson County, and we want it to be the most high-functioning courthouse in that regard as possible. Secondly is to resolve all of the failings and issues with regard to the existing courthouse, to ensure that all of those items are mitigated in this new design, and it'll be a design that'll last a long time. To that end, is the third category that I want to highlight, and that this building is programmed and to be designed to be a 75-plus year facility. It requires the level of material, the level of systems that can be able to accommodate a very long lifespan, and also have flexibility built in. And the design team is going to talk about that. And the last one is a more broad kind of goal, but it is to make this a true model for an instrument of justice and service, to make Johnson County's courthouse stand above all of it, not relative to its overall design, but how it serves the public. And those are the four that we kind of wanted to highlight. In developing the criteria documents, we started this process in May of 2017. We held several objectives during this process that translate directly into the design. And those are to meet all of those 9 project goals, to let the building function and let the building's function drive the design. Design it from the inside out so that the building function is what gives it its form, its life, and that is the red line for this building. The third objective that we wanted to make sure that we hit is to do everything we can to enhance its delivery of services, and again, plan for flexibility. The process that we went through is we've had hundreds of public outreach meetings that have occurred since 2005. These have been numerous. There have been meetings with stakeholders, public outreach, and engagement that go back all the way to 2016 as well. Beginning in May of this year, we've had over 75 stakeholder and user meetings in order to develop this set of criteria documents. And that's very extensive. This has been a highly interactive process with the citizens and with the county stakeholders and the people that will be using this building. The results of all this process has been to develop in 6 volumes very detailed guide for what the design should be, how the building is to perform, and the requirements from the county. And we did this in a way that we hope very much so fosters creativity and innovation from this design build team. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff Lang, who leads the design team.
Thanks, Rick. You know, one of the things we've done here since November is we've met and had workshops, for 5 workshops with stakeholders, and they're not just workshops of one day. They're workshops that maybe 3 or 4 days and a week long. And then we have a team that sits behind us today, as well as in our offices, continuing to work on this project. So we've been doing a lot of work over the last 4 months. You're going to see some of the end product of that, see what this building is. We have been doing workshops, as you can see here, with some of the images from downstairs in room 1300 with models, sketch paper, 3D renderings. We've also met with the city. Every month we meet with them to update, coordinate, make sure we're working close in hand with their thoughts and making sure they're up to date with what we're doing. So we've been doing those things as well as a team. We also have been meeting with them periodically as well to give them some preliminary information as we look at our plan development information we're getting ready to submit, as well as some of the other documentation that they're requiring on the north parking lot and some of those things. So we've been coordinating utilities and those types of things as well. So with that, one of the things that we have done is we started out talking about our design process of a courthouse. So Brian Chafee and Martin Ice, who are here today from Finterest, are our courts designers, and they're working with us hand in hand to come up with what the best solution is for this county. So I'm going to have Brian start to talk about our courts design and the philosophy that we started with on this project.
Thank you, Jeff. My role really is, as Jeff mentioned, is to describe the design approach to you. And we have basically built the approach around building the courthouse design from the inside out, as Rick articulated, with a very well conceived and articulated set of...
Excuse me, could you move the microphone a little closer?
A little closer, there.
Got him.
Yeah.
So we've approached the design both from the inside out, as you'll see here, and from the outside in. So first, to start with how a courthouse is conceived from the inside out. What you see on the screen here is what we call a typical court set. That is to say, it's 2 courtrooms organized around a holding cell, which you see in red there, with public access, which you see in yellow, and the judicial access in blue. And this becomes the basic building block of a modern courthouse. Think of it as the DNA, basically, of a courthouse. Next slide. So the importance of this is that it sets up the potential for really safe, secure, modern courthouses have 3 separate secure circulation systems. So that you can see in the diagram on the left here that the public come through the public corridor into the courtroom. The judiciary comes through the secure circulation in blue there into the courtroom. And the in custody inmates enter through the red there into the courtroom. And so the first time they ever really meet at one point in time is in the courtroom within the safe, secure environment of that courtroom. So this is the basic building block, and as you can see on the diagram on the right, that is arrayed in this project design and this approach to have 3 court sets, they call it 6 courtrooms per floor on the typical court floors, each with these separate secure circulation systems. So if that defines the basic organization of the court floors, we also have some very unique entry elements and lower level components. This slide describes the important aspect of security and circulation coming into the building. We have to safely and efficiently process people coming into the courthouse in the morning. Typically there's a morning rush, the dockets are all starting. On jury call days, there may be 200 or 300 people arriving. So it's very important that this process be safe and secure, and we provide the service to the people coming to the courthouse in a weatherproof kind of environment. So you see the entry there and the queuing, and then into the lobby. One of the things that this project has conceived of, even from the outset, in the program criteria documents is this concept of an Emporium of justice. And this is basically the place where a lot of public activities take place. It's a service-oriented place, and it tends to be the functions that are the highest volume of visitors to the courthouse. And you can see here on the first floor diagram, the lobby has access directly to the clerk of the court, to the help center, to some high volume hearing rooms, and to the law library. And then by extension, next slide, that 2-story lobby, go on to the next slide there. Okay, there we go. The next floor has the high volume courts, which you can think of as traffic courts, high capacity courts, which have bigger seating capacity, which might be where sensational trials are held, and the jury assembly space, which, as I described, is maybe 200 or 300 people on jury call days. And that space, the jury assembly space, is also a place that can be used for other community meetings, maybe after-hours events, things like that, to really extend the useful utility of that space. And so all of these really constitute a significant amount of public volume, which we want to keep low in the building and close to the entry. So if there are after-hours access, they can facilitate those functions, as well as all the visitors don't have to go up through the building. Makes it much more efficient in terms of the building planning. So if you think of that design from the inside out, you get a diagram like this, which on the left is a plan view, and on the right is kind of a perspective view, where we have a series of floors that's labeled there as courtroom tower, which house the courtrooms, the typical courtrooms themselves, and the judiciary. And on the lower level, where it's the lower 2 floors, which is basically a podium expression labeled the Emporium of Justice. And that is the space that contains these functions that I just described on the first 2 floors.
Which superheroes will be setting up in the Emporium of Justice?
Yet to be determined, I guess. Okay. So that's kind of how the building design was approached from the inside out, taking the program criteria documents and the program of spatial requirements. Think of it as really the functional requirements to make a courthouse work. But then there's also elements that have to do with how the building sets in its environment, how it sets in the city or in the community. In this diagram, you can see basically just outlines that. They're at the corner of Santa Fe and Kansas, with a dashed line there indicating the future removal of the current courthouse, which provides an opportunity for kind of a civic green, if you will, which is a traditional element within, courthouse architecture, to have a lawn in front of the courthouse, and then anchored on the south end by the county admin building. So that's the basic arrangement. We know also, we think about where people will be arriving to this building. The project itself includes a surface parking to the north, as you see there, and as you'll learn a little bit more here shortly. And it also envisions that many people will park in the Cherry Street parking garage. That really creates kind of a spine along Cherry Street that links all these buildings together and forms what looks like a sweet spot for the entry. What you see there is the circle and the entry label. And it knits really all of these civic buildings together into a civic precinct. Okay. This describes that circulation path. It also recognizes that Kansas Avenue is a significant view corridor for the project, as is Santa Fe, and this building, because of its size, will very likely create an anchor to the approximate western edge of downtown. So as we study this design, and we call it the patient search of going through different solutions, we study it, of course. Nowadays we do a lot of this in computer modeling, but we also employ physical modeling a lot, because there's nothing like a physical model to really move around it and view the space. So as we began to do that, and the image on the upper right shows a photograph of a physical model that we built that shows a linear building organized along Kansas Avenue. And what we quickly learned from that image is that because of the program that it accommodates, it's a fairly imposing building potentially on Kansas Avenue. So we began to look at ways to really try to mitigate that imposition, and started finding ways to push the building mass a little bit away from Kansas, which you can see in the lower image there, both of them taken from north of the site on Kansas. And in the plan view, you can see the arrow sort of shows how a slight bend is developed in the building, which both eases that frontage on Kansas, but also opens the building up to a southern exposure and a way to engage with the future civic green and the existing county admin building there. As you can see in this diagram, there's a real, and Craig will talk about this here shortly, there's a real strong relationship between those two buildings and the potential for what the civic green might be in the future. So there's also other points of access, of course, that are required for a courthouse. Notably, how inmates get into the courthouse is an important consideration. They need to come in a secure, safe way. And in this case, the design calls for a below-grade tunnel that connects directly the jail with the lower level of the courthouse. And then those inmates then transport vertically through those red spaces, holding cells on the floor that I pointed out that are in the middle of the typical courtroom set. So they're never intermingling with the public. They're never really intermingling with anybody until other than law enforcement and court security officers, until they come into the courtrooms themselves. On the north of the slide here, on the building, you can see there's also access for secure parking, which is part of the building, below grade, and of course loading and functions that every building has to have. So that's the basic kind of external sort of influences. I'm going to turn it back to Jeff, and he's going to kind of walk you through a little bit of the stacking of the spaces in the building.
Thanks, Brian. So one of the things that you're going to see here is this is the first floor in a diagrammatic form. So as Brian talked a little bit about earlier, how are we addressing the public lobby and the public areas? So how do we incorporate that Emporium of Justice? So the yellow portion here is that public lobby, and you can see we've got the clerk of the court, help center, law library, the hearing rooms, right there on that first level. So as you come into that queuing area, as you go through the screening, those are right there front of mind, so you can go to those spaces. Those are the spaces that most public individuals are going to go to, come, do the work they need to do at the courthouse, and go back, go home, go to the next place they need to go to. So we want those right there at that location. You can also see here we've got the separation of circulation. So you've got the light blue, which is the staff circulation, and it doesn't interact with the public. And you also have then the orange in this floor plan, shows the orange in those elevators that stack from the basement all the way up to the 7th floor. And then on the 2nd floor, we've got the high volume courts, the large courtrooms, the jury assembly. Again, all of that is seeable right there as you come into that public lobby. So that's the important part. They can go up the grand stair, nice waiting area and space right in that area for public and other individuals to be. Gives a great deal of space for those that are coming to jury assembly. There may be 350 to 400 on a day, so you want to have that circulation space to get those people to move in and out of the space and the area. And then you can also see there on the west portion of the building is the judges' chambers and how that is separated away from the public area. And then also the orange elevators that stack. And then here is the typical court floor. And as Brian said, in our design, we've got 6 courtrooms per floor. So you can see how they array across that curved area with the public facing the east. And we'll see what that looks like here in a little bit. And then the staff area off to the west. We've got staff elevators, stairs, all that allows for those people to move up and down the building in their own way. And then also with the inmate elevators that are in between each of those courtroom pairs. We've got holding in there as well. So those pieces are like Brian said, that allows for those in custody to be there, go into the courtroom, and that's the first time they meet the judge and the public. And then as we looked at this building, as we stacked it together, this is a 7-story building with a basement. So we've got a basement that has the secure parking, some central holding space. We've also got on the first floor, as I already said, clerk of the court, help center, hearing rooms, law library, and some other office space, sheriff staff. And then on the 2nd floor, we have the courtrooms, jury services, and Jim's office space. On the 3rd floor is district attorney, and then 4 through 7 is all courts. One of the pieces that we've done as we've looked at this building is what's the flexibility? I think that's one of the things that Rick talked about from the standpoint of a 75-year building, right? So what's the flexibility? So this building allows for expansion of courtroom and judges' chambers on the 3rd and 2nd floor. So those are office spaces that are there currently. So those are spaces that could be located somewhere else, could be an additional building built adjacent to this building on a site. So those are some things long-term. We're not talking 5 years from now. We're probably talking 25, 30 years from now that those types of things would begin to occur. So we've built that into this design as we look at it today. So with that, I'm going to give Craig the opportunity here to talk about how we actually master plan the whole entire site that we have currently, plus the building site, and talk about what we went through as a design approach for that as well.
If this question is getting ahead of your presentation, just let me know. But another issue that was discussed and presented was in the current courthouse, my accuser may be coming down the same hallway, not in jail, out on bail, or, a hearing. And so currently I'm sitting there in the bench in the hallway, and my accuser comes down the hallway into the court. How have we provided for separation there? And secondly, in the current courthouse, we see many attorneys standing, sitting in a public hallway, discussing issues with their client. It was my perception that we were going to have some kind of convenient area where they could meet out of the public view. where is that at?
Sure, I think it's appropriate for us to talk about it right now because it's before Craig's part. But I can tell you that regarding the second point, there are within each court set, or outside each courtroom, I should say, there's actually 2 conference rooms associated with each courtroom that are labeled attorney-client conference rooms. And they're kind of multi-purpose conference rooms, but they can be used for exactly what you're describing as places, or even witness preparation spaces and that type of thing. Okay. Regarding your first question, I think there are some provisions that the design has. I wouldn't say that there's separate secure access necessarily for the kind of somebody who may be intimidated. Is that what you were referring to?
Well, yes. You talk about a witness room. I suppose that could be compatible with. Let's say there's a physical assault case between a female and a male. The female sitting there. The male who's been accused comes down the hallway. I'm assuming that the one who's been assaulted could be in one of these rooms you're talking about with the attorney.
Absolutely.
To avoid that contact.
Right. Many jurisdictions use them as kind of witness waiting rooms as well as attorney-client conference rooms. So that type of thing can be used in that kind of scenario, yes.
Okay, well, if that kind of use is included in the design of those rooms, that's good, that's great, thank you.
Good, okay. Well, my name's Craig, and I'm with Civitas, and we are urban designers. So we're going to shift a little bit in terms of content outside of the building. As you can see, the courts buildings are intricate and complex, and I think they've done an excellent job of describing that as a foundation for a great building. And so our role is to think about how does this building fit into the site, how does it fit into the immediate context, and then how does it stitch with the adjacent community and neighborhoods, which is a tremendous opportunity. And so for us, we've, as a team, when I say us, we've been thinking hard over the last few months about a few basic principles. And the first one is how will this courthouse be an elegant, approachable, friendly, dignified experience for people who need to use the court's facility, for one. And the second one is how do we integrate this into the neighborhood so that it's a cherished and valuable asset for the people who live and visit the downtown environment. And then the third one is how can we leverage both the design quality and the relationships to the downtown and the neighborhood to create a very beautiful place that people take a lot of pride in. And so with that as a foundation, we've been thinking about this project a lot like the images that you see in this slide. So none of these images are a proposal or anything. All they are representing how we've been thinking about what's important in a public realm. And for a project like this that can be very catalytic to other things that happen in downtown, of course the courts building can't be, and its plazas and things like that, can't be everything to a downtown, but they certainly can set the bar and they certainly can participate and create new edges. And so we imagine that with this new project and the possibilities across the street when the existing courthouse comes down, that there's tremendous opportunity to think about downtown differently. So that's what this is all about. We can bring on the next slide. And so for us, it starts with connectivity. Of course, that's the primary goal of any healthy downtown environment, is that accessibility is there. It's convenient. It's beautiful. It's a great place to use day in, day out as a visitor, as someone who lives there. So for us, it starts with Cherry Street specifically. We know that Cherry Street is the primary retail street. It's sort of the main street quality of downtown that we'd like to build on that momentum with the emphasis of this new courts building and how can we create a better connection from both the neighborhoods to the north, south, east, and the west to create kind of a new heart of the city, if you will. And so Cherry Street, as you can see, is represented with this red line, and it has different characters, and that's very intentional, as represented by these two photographs. We know that this pedestrian spine on both the north and south edges might take on a very different quality. It may be a little more contemplative, a little more quiet, residential, neighborhood kind of quality, but very beautiful, safe, and shady. But as it moves towards the middle, where you have the broader dash, that may be more of the civic core. It may take on more of a quality that you see down on the lower image, where it has a little more civic stature to it, and a little bit more scale that is appropriate to a public building. And then as we move down into in front of the retail environment, we think it may take on more of a great Main Street kind of a quality. And then we'll transition back into the neighborhood to the south. And so we think that this is a great armature to hang a design scheme for both the immediate court site as well as its context onto. And we can probably go to the next slide. And so building upon that idea, we've sort of reduced conceptually the site thinking into three fundamental pieces, if you will. And we've been thinking about them as sources of inspiration and how to think about the landscape texture of both the immediate site and the contextual site. And the first one is the oak savanna. And it's a very common landscape. It's a landscape you live with here, but it's actually very important to this region. And we think this as a source of inspiration for what the building might sit in is a very strong idea. And it's something that can give the building an appropriate scale and a way of transitioning down into the street level, which I'll talk about in a second. The second one are the plaza environments. So we think they need to be a very welcoming environment that people enjoy being in, because we know the activities in front of a courts building are varied. You know, it can be anything from waiting for a ride home to you're waiting to meet your attorney, or there may be a small public event in that space that's coordinated with the space across the street. So we know that it needs to be adaptable, beautiful, and comfortable. And then the third one is really the idea that if you really think hard about when you take the existing courts building away from the site, what an amazing opportunity that you have here, which is unique to Olathe. And that opportunity shouldn't be taken lightly. So we've been thinking about how can a public space help shape and form a more vibrant, healthy downtown, simply. So we can probably go to the next slide. And so it's resulted in a site plan that looks something like this. The north block is dedicated to the primary parking facilities for the courts building. And again, it has a relationship to the Cherry Street spine that would allow for ease of parking and then ease of pedestrian movement to the spine to come down to the courts building. And then that same spine also is a great pedestrian link from the north neighborhoods down into the downtown environment. Then the center block, you can see the building, we have the center building location, and I'll talk about that in detail in a second. And then lastly, you can see with the building gone, the public space that could be formed could be a tremendous asset for the community. So in detail, the northern lots have an east-west organization, and the reason for that is so that the pedestrian movement can move directly to the spine and to the building. Its graphic and landscape character might take on a quality of the two images that you see off to the right, where they can be very shady environments, but also articulated with plant material that is inspired by the Savannah oak landscape. And specifically at the courthouse site, Brian had mentioned the organization of the building. You can see that subtle radii on both edges, and the tilt in one direction gives you an approach from the Kansas side and from the Santa Fe side, a very proud relationship to the building, but it also gives the building a nice, handsome context to sit in. One side is more of a domesticated plaza environment. The other side is a soft landscape with tree canopy. And you can see that this is a view from the corner of Kansas and Santa Fe. Might give you a very pleasant walk and approach up to the building.
So we've talked about the aspects that internally create the courthouse. we've talked about, Craig just talked about the external influences. Now we're going to talk a little bit about how that layers into an architectural expression. So I think what's of interest is to develop a compelling architecture that's based on not only the internal and the external, but other perhaps more symbolic aspects, things that are what are the appropriate expression for a courthouse in a dignified setting that people go to resolve their conflicts. And so I'm excited about how this is working, and this is going to describe a little bit to you. So what you see here is essentially the building tower, as we've described it, and it's just represented here kind of as a glass box. What this does is the public corridor, which you would have on the inside of that curve, would then be able to see out onto this beautiful civic plaza that Craig just described, and the Cherry Street corridor. And that's important for people to be able, people are often disoriented when they get to a courthouse. They're there for maybe reasons that are not comfortable. They're unease, they're not at ease. And so sometimes it really helps if they're in the public corridor to be grounded by looking back out onto the landscape and see where they came from and be oriented in some ways. So that's one of the things that this glass does in that particular aspect of the building. So this is that singular gesture of a form that's made in glass. And then after that, we look at other spaces that kind of layer up against that glass. On the left there, the brown forms represent, architectural precast concrete and stone, basically that are expressions of the judiciary and the judges' chambers and their staff and all the folks in the judiciary that make this happen. And then on the right there is a series of stacked jury deliberation rooms that occur on each floor. So that's obviously where the juries go to deliberate. So that's a very honest expression of the program while being, quite urban in terms of how this form was created. And then finally, what you see here is that podium, or the Emporium of Justice that we talked about, which is a programmatically bigger area, and it provides a very suitable and appropriate solid base, sort of representing, the permanence and stability of the courts, and it's expressed, we think, in some variation of stone or some elements that make it seem permanent. So what we'd like to do next is sort of show you a model. And we have, as I mentioned, we study and work in models quite a bit. We built a physical model of the context. You may have to
Drum roll or?
stand up. There. You may have to stand up a little bit to see it exactly. But so this, Martin just turned on the light, so you can see exactly where the areas are that we're thinking of as being transparent versus opaque. And generally, you're looking at the east side, which is the public corridor side, which is mostly transparent. Obviously, we're going to have some opacity in the facade of that, but it's predominantly transparent. And then on the other side, Martin, you want to see if you can turn it around? So on the other side, which is the Kansas Avenue side, and facing west, so from an environmental standpoint, a much harsher orientation. It's more opaque, and it also is more opaque because that also represents the functions that occur in there more appropriately. So this kind of is the mass and scale of the model and the sort of use of materials from the standpoint of transparent and opaque that we're looking for. And I think it's, we've been looking very closely at how it fits on the site and how it relates not only to the green, as we've been talking about, but also to the county admin building, which you can see. And also, really, the City Hall building is an important part of this too, and the plaza that's created between the new courthouse and City Hall will be a very active, vitalized space for both of those buildings.
And one of the things is you look at it, and as you have time to come around afterwards, you'll realize that one of the things we did here is we brought that podium down to a level that gives it some human scale to the building, because the building is very tall. It also starts to really work well with City Hall from the standpoint of the scale of that building. So those are some of the things we looked at as we continued to design that.
Yes, good point. And I think we can also show you a video, which we have, that walks around the site a little bit as if you were a pedestrian, which makes it a little easier to understand and get a sense of the scale and use of materials of the building. So as it's loading up here, so this is obviously flying around the building from the east. You can see a fairly dramatic element, which we think is an important gesture there, which is we envision that being a limestone. Limestone is a very special building material product in Kansas. There's lots of beautiful limestone quarries. There's limestone that are used in accent ways in this building and in other buildings around town. So we would really like to bring that notion forward. Here you can see the west side of the building, and it's kind of layered up. This is from the corner opposite where the jail would be. And then down on the ground plane, walking back to the east, there's also stone, accents around the base of the building, we would imagine. This is, where we are with this is there's some very strong concepts that we feel strongly about, but we're still developing the entire materials palette. And, for example, the tower itself, how is that clad? We know it should be primarily glass and a curtain wall, but is there some pattern or texture in that? Is there some different colors we should study? That type of thing. This view shows how the scale is broken down by these layers of the jury deliberation suite, the judiciary spaces. And this also, in addition to moving the building away from Kansas Avenue, helps make it feel a little more comfortable rather than just a massive building with a singular expression. Walking from the north parking to the south, along the east face, this is where many people would enter the building. And again, this limestone element sort of calls out the entrance. And you can begin to see the county admin building in the distance, which helps tie that with this project. And most courthouses, it's important for it to have the right decorum and dignity. And so it's lifted up a few steps on a plinth to help represent that notion of what takes place inside a courthouse is important. And we think all these expressions will be very strong. We want it to feel comfortable in the community and be a building of community pride. There's the last little bit of this that goes inside. This is the kind of the conception of the Emporium of Justice. You can see it's a two-story high space, a feature stair that gets you up to those second floor spaces that I mentioned, so one would not have to use the elevator. And then you see here ready access to the clerk of courts, and all those public functions that would benefit by this close proximity and easy wayfinding for the public, who many of which might come to the courthouse once or twice, in their life, if that much. And then here you can see from inside that there is a view back down to the green and to the county admin building. The security checkpoint shown there, and then moving north on Cherry Street. This is the impression one would have. And then kind of finally a rendering.
Let me ask you this. There was previous discussion about unknown security activities outside the structure and the necessity of the skin of the building to a certain level, trying to address those security concerns. Is that part of your design also? I'm not asking what, but
Yes.
Yes, it is. I'll just say the building setback from the street, which is obviously from a security standpoint a good thing, but it also establishes the presence of the building more strongly than if it pulled up to the street edge. And then there's other techniques that would be employed as well.
okay, all right, thank you. Okay.
Next slide.
Is that it, or next step?
Thinking.
So these are some more, just, you saw these embedded in the actual video, but these are still renderings of a couple of different vantage points around the building. Fairly dynamic, but still an important civic building that, given its mass and scale, we feel is comfortable on its site. So I think at this point, we're going to turn it over to Kyle McQuistion to talk a little bit about project schedule.
So as I was thinking about my part, the design is pretty exciting. Pretty exciting to see. I'm going to talk about schedule and budget. It's really only exciting when it doesn't go well. So my job is to keep the excitement away. This is a familiar schedule that you've all seen. We've grayed out 2017 because it's passed. It's still a target to be turning over the building in the fall of the fourth quarter of 2020. We're still on track for that. Go to the next slide. We're tracking closely with budget and design and kind of how we do that, a couple things. We're automated with the 3D models. We understand the design with the design team at a depth that enables us to have periodic updates on the budget as the work progresses. And it's real-time estimating, which helps everyone understand the target and help maintain the budget. To date, schematic design, looking backwards, has gone well. This is the first milestone that supports that finish date. It's been important for a couple reasons. It helps, it defines the massing of the building. It enables all the designers to finish structure and systems and the general arrangement inside the building to verify the building's the right size. So big milestone from here. So looking forward, this work enables us to begin the approval process with the City of Olathe. Tomorrow we'll submit for the first round of reviews to understand code issues are being complied with and begin that process of the development of the site. The first bid package will come out in May, and that will be for the dirt work on the site as well as utility work and including foundation work. And what that does is it enables us to get the schedule started while allowing the design to continue to progress with the county. So it's a strategy to help us compress the schedule, and it'll help us get started. Groundbreaking in July of this year, and that'll be construction start. The next key bid package is in August, and that's going to include what we call core and shell. It's the basics of the building, the structure, the exterior enclosure, and that'll allow us in November to begin vertical construction. So those are just big milestones that we're planning toward and looking forward to. Next
May the weather
slide.
be with you.
Sorry?
May the weather be with you.
May the weather be with us. It's good to start in the summer. This slide is our early look at what the site will look like in May. As we mobilize, we'll take advantage of the parking lot on the north of the building is our laydown yard. There we'll have trailers, there we'll bring equipment and material in and stage it for the building construction as it starts. The large circle in the center is the radius for the tower crane. So we'll have a tower crane situated appropriately to access the building all the way up and to access offloading from Kansas and from Cherry to feed the building with materials. If you go to the next slide, this slide is really just a street view from Kansas and Santa Fe. It highlights the perimeter fence for security and safety for the site. You can see here there's a plan to enter off of Kansas, access to the west side of the building, and then exit back out to Kansas to make that delivery efficient and be able to offload using the tower crane. This picture is a little misleading. We kind of begin with the end in mind, as someone said. This just helps us plan the right height of the cooling tower, knowing where the building will be, helps us understand the offsets, helps us plan the work. I think that's all I
I can
have.
pick it up from here, Kyle. Thank you. So again, thank you to the design build team. We're excited. This is a great milestone, as we indicated to you. We are anxious and excited to, certainly get your reaction to where we are in our process. We will have additional public engagement. We want to get their reaction of how they perceive or how they react to what we've designed so far and the design elements that we've developed. A couple real quick minor things to mention. If you didn't notice on some of the site plans, we have retained the Osage orange tree, so it is worked into the north parking lot. We are in progress with the public art process. I believe next week we have shortlist interviews with the shortlisted artists, and then they will join the design team to work on their concept for the public art element. Kyle alluded to this a little bit, but I wanted to make sure that it's clear. One of the reasons we chose the design build process was the ability to overlap construction with design. So we're at schematic design right now. We'll be moving into design development. That will allow us to get some early construction packages started and in the ground, and then hopefully coming out of the ground soon. We'll finalize construction documents later this year after we've had the groundbreaking and construction has started. So would be happy to facilitate questions of me or the design team, so would love to.
I do have a couple of questions, Brad. I don't know whether there's a slide that can depict the relocation of the statuary there by the Olathe City Hall, how that might be incorporated into, or the relocation and the coordination with the north entrance to Olathe City Hall. Is there?
Do we?
Probably the best.
Okay.
They see the cursor? Can't see the cursor? Okay, well, you can see the sort of eastern bow of the building, that, and then to the right of that, you can see a vertical sort of green spine. If you look just to the right of that, you see a formal row of trees that separates the parking lot from that part of the pedestrian spine. You can see there's little rectangles that are represented along that edge. So our concept here is to take that art, and it needs some careful study, but the concept is to take the art which is fanned out to you now and then put them in more of this perspective so that you experience it in one direction, and then from the other direction, maybe an opportunity to experience something different.
But it will still be an integral part of the location.
That's our thinking now, is that it can absolutely.
And I think there was some conversation about the current fountain. Is that will remain in place, or?
Well, right now it's an idea, and we're pricing different scenarios. But what you're seeing in the diagram is the location of the current fountain. That's correct.
Okay. All right. And Brad, maybe this, I had a question about the parking on the north side. How many spaces, and it seems that would be the main parking for the courthouse. How would you differentiate between staff for the courthouse versus public coming in for jury duty, whatever?
Well, Chairman, to be honest with you,
Is the parking going to be ample to handle both of those, or will the staff parking be directed somewhere else?
we'll have to work through some of those details. We haven't worked that out. There, you know, again, as we reported a couple years ago, there is ample parking in downtown Olathe. Now, is it within, you know, 1 block or 2 blocks? Not all of it is, but the Cherry Street garage, the existing garage we have, will still be a critical element. And so we'll have to work on operational things like who parks in the north parking lot, but certainly public would have a priority and certainly a portion of that. It's just a matter of whether would staff park there or would they be expected to park in other locations. We're hopeful, we anticipate that the west, the Olathe parking lot to the west of the new courthouse will still be available about the time that we, construction is ending, but again, Olathe has indicated they're interested in redeveloping that, but we're kind of keeping our fingers crossed for the opposite, so it'd be parking. So there's plenty of parking, but we'll have to work out that process on how it's allocated, but public would take priority.
And the handicapped parking, that's the area of the Olathe lot that will be able to be used.
Yes, we're working with Olathe, and they've certainly verbally indicated, and we anticipate that we'll be able to really combine our ADA parking with their ADA parking in their lot. So they'll have what's allocated for them, and then we'll have to add additional ones for the allocation for the new courthouse. But it'll be there, provide close proximity to both facilities, City Hall and the courthouse.
Will there be any diagonal parking on Kansas Avenue on the west side of the building?
We don't anticipate it at this time. I think we're still working that, but you know, with the Olathe Envision plan, if I remember correctly, they talked about bike paths and changing the dynamic of Kansas Avenue. So I don't know if that might be a possibility down the future.
I'm not sure it needs to be there, quite frankly, but again, for building security, I think so. Just a question.
Okay.
Mr. Ashcraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, great job. It is exciting for most of you. Worrisome, I think, is probably appropriate. I mean, this is a big project. It will change downtown Olathe and change county government in a lot of ways. Mr. Lane, I think you mentioned this, and Mr. Vickers, I think you may have mentioned this too. But I happened to attend Envision Olathe meeting earlier this week, and they are talking about what they'd like to see in downtown Olathe. And one of the questions we discussed, and the term I would use is the facade, but I think you talked about the expression, or the chairman said the skin of the building, but to make sure that the city is, particularly the city leadership, is fully aware of and is embracing this. And you've indicated that you've had a number of meetings. I would encourage you to make sure you make that connection because there wasn't a lot of conceptual connection in that meeting, and maybe it just was the wrong time and the wrong place. But I want this to be successful because, yeah, 75 years from now or less, they'll either be praising us or not so much for the look of this building, because on your model, it seems to dwarf the dimension of Olathe, and there's not going to be very many people that are going to go through Olathe and not notice it. So I just would encourage you to continue that, so ramp that up if you can.
We are, and so we are submitting on Friday for the development plan, preliminary development plan with the city, so they will see elevations at that point. We have not released any of the 3D information. They will also get some of that. And we have a scheduled meeting set up for Thursdays, and so we will continue to meet with them and talk about that. We have talked materials with them, and I think that will be an ongoing discussion. But I hope with what we've designed today, these materials fit with the context of what we've got here within the downtown area and within Kansas. So we hope that, and yes, we want to continue to have that dialogue with them.
And I hope that's true. I will offer a perspective that when the city of Olathe did its strategic plan back in 2000, 2003, there was a lot of discussion about what will the future of downtown look like, and there was a lot of energy on kind of preserving and reinvigorating what they called the Park Cherry look of downtown. This complex over here, which the current admin building kind of does, and the current City Hall kind of does, but the jail, and I know Joe hates it when I say the board cube jail over there. I mean, that's a different look, okay? Not necessarily bad, but it's a different look. So good luck with that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, well, I should mention there have been meetings with the city leadership. I've attended some of them. Mr. Brown has attended some of them, and staff has been involved. And I think it continues that we're on the right track. One last question I have, Brad. The Osage orange tree, which you mentioned, is the treatment similar to family nursery, or did we come up with a better plan?
I think that the treatment might be very similar to what was done at Family Tree Nursery. To be honest with you, I haven't talked with the team about whether there's pavers in an area around the tree to allow for water to get down through the root system, but that's something we would work through as the design evolves. But certainly we have a reasonable sized green area that the tree will be surrounded by, and then we'll have to be concerned. Did that answer your question, Chairman?
Close enough, close enough. I guess I was impressed by what the nursery had done with a major big tree in their parking lot, and yet parking was available, and the tree had been protected.
Yes.
So.
No, I agree. I went and looked at that, and I think I just haven't had a chance to share that with the design team, and as we get through the next phases of design, we'll work through that.
Thank you. Mr. Allen.
Thank you. First of all, congratulations. I'm very impressed. The curved design and the layout, very thoughtful. From my perspective, a lot better than a rectangle building, so that looks very good. Could you put slide 19 up, and maybe I was going to go through a thought process. Had the opportunity to visit two newer courthouses in Columbus, Ohio, and in Fort Worth, Texas. The jury assembly rooms were on the first floor, and I'm looking at ours, the law library's there, and we're proposing the second floor, and it appears we have several thousand visitors a year that would be potentially one-time visitors going through this jury pool. You have all different age segments, maybe disabled or whatever. Maybe the thought process why that's not on the first floor versus the second floor.
Sure. I think a couple of things come to mind. I think one of the things that's important is getting the sheriff's security offices directly adjacent to the security checkpoint, so they have backup and oversight into that. So that occupies that space on the first floor right now. I think additionally, it's a little bit of balancing the space need requirements between the first and second floor. But we have really endeavored to make it very easy and clear to get to the second floor via either elevator or that kind of feature stair. And the jury assembly space is one of the first spaces that you see on the right on the second floor, so the jury assembly reception. It could be either on the first or the second floor in everything else being equal, but I think in this case it was really trying to balance all the space needs that are competing for both of those floors.
Okay. And that's fine.
There's two additional reasons why we felt that was important. One is we're pairing that jury suite with our meeting rooms that are available to everyone in the building, so that we're treating a kind of a suite
It is right there by the snack areas as well, and all of those components together make it a fairly large overall suite. So it's kind of functioning like the lower level of a hotel, where you have all your meeting rooms, your large jury room that can be multi-purpose, which is adjacent to the snack area as well, so that it really functions as potentially even an after-hours suite.
And you're not supposed to tag on more than twice, but I think I had another important reason for it to be on the second floor is currently it's directly across from where the high-capacity courtrooms are. And so there's beginning discussion about using the high-capacity courtrooms for the voir dire or jury selection process. So they would go directly from the second floor jury assembly into those high-capacity courtrooms, and you never would have to go up into the building unless you were selected and impaneled as a juror. Okay. So that was another kind of factor that played into it.
Okay. Thank you. I think you, in my mind, justify that. And just one follow-up. The commissioner asked the question on the disabled parking, and that's frankly one of the big criteria personally I had on this building to make sure that the access. And I just am a little hesitant that before we start digging a foundation and setting a building, that we actually have a signed agreement with Olathe on that disabled parking, because if we have to end up to the north, that's a long way. So to me, that's real critical, and it sounds like you're getting there, but that's something I would want to see resolved before we actually, frankly, start construction. So, but other than that, very impressed. So thank you.
Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. Both of my questions are directed toward Brad, but just a quick comment. The building is impressive. It's a nice model. It's going to be a beautiful building. So, Brad, a couple of things. To echo what Commissioner Allen and a couple of other commissioners have said about parking. I hear this from constituents. I hear this from neighbors that people want to know, when I go to this new fancy great big building, where am I parking? And when I tell them we're parking to the north, well, how many spaces are there? So how many spaces are there in that parking lot as it's designed right now?
I believe it's 250?
15? 250?
245?
215. I can read his lips. Okay.
Auctioning.
Apparently I'm better at that than you are, Brad. I can see that. Okay, so then that builds then to my next question is, how many employees are going to work in this building, and how many daily visitors are we going to have expecting on an average day to that building? And you can answer this at another time. I understand that might take a little calculation, so I know I'm putting you on the spot, and that's fine if you can get back to me. But that leads to the next question is similar to what Commissioner Allen had just said, is making sure that we have agreements in place and that we have this figured out with Olathe. There are 2 or 3 different variations about how our parking is going to work in conversations rolling with Olathe right now that I'm aware of. So we need to nail down what we're doing on the parking piece. I don't want to get this big building built and then say, well, there's just not going to be any parking and you're going to have to walk 2 or 3 blocks. That will not work. That is going to get me and everyone else up here in hot water.
That is not going to happen.
That is not good. That would not be good. And then just one additional follow-up question is, what is the budget that we originally set out? Based on sales tax, we had come up with a number, and we knew that over the 10-year period, what that would yield. How does that number fit in with, I'm a contractor, so my anxiety level goes sky high for you. I'm so, but curving a building is very expensive compared to a box building. I get that it's pretty, but all of the things that I saw some stuff in some of those pictures that, I'm a contractor, and I don't know how you do that. So it's expensive to do some of those things that way. How does that fit in the big picture with the budget that we've estimated?
Well, I'll just say that our budget has remained consistent. So from the beginning, we came out during the public education before the public sales tax vote with a number of $182 million for the courthouse. That was NPV dollars. Dollars at that point in time. You incorporate construction inflation, and we're at $193 million to midpoint of construction is how that's done. And so that's the number. We're not saying, oh, you have a curved building now, well, we'll give you some more money. No, it's fixed. It's build it, meet our program, build the building within the constraints of the budget that we have. I think that's hopefully clear to everybody.
They're all nodding.
That makes it simple, I like it.
And they're doing a good job. They're working on it, working
Well,
hard.
along those lines, I received a request the other day suggesting that the quarter cent over 10 years was going to raise more money than we had assigned to the construction of the new courthouse and the medical examiner's office. So I would remind everybody that that quarter cent by state statute has to be shared with the cities. And as I recall, the city's share is like 37.25% of those quarter cent sales tax proceeds. So when you factor that out, we are where we said we would be, I think. So the county gets to keep 62.75% of that total revenue. So, Mr. Schaefer, do you have a question?
I'm as much excited about your concept for the green area when the courthouse comes down, as you indicate on page 26. Did you bring that up, 26? Yeah. I'm sorry? Microphone. Oh, microphone. 26. I was much excited about the concept for the green space as I am about the design of the building, okay? I have a couple of technical questions as well, but could you describe for us what your concept is there in the public space in front of where the courthouse will be removed?
Sure. I'd first qualify it, though, that, creating good public space needs more integration with the public in its design. However, we've done enough of these to know what the basic bones might be and be successful. So when you look at this diagram, it's difficult to point at things, but you'll see if you were to draw a line from the entry of the new courts building to this building, it's sort of that diagonal line there.
Yes.
Everything to the east of that is intended to be an open lawn. Now, that open lawn space is a significant space that can handle any multitude of public festivals, events, concerts, movie nights, any of that kind of thing that might characterize downtown activity. It has built into it a gradient where the turf grass is pitched at about 2.5%. So it's a little bit more than a soccer field. Yeah. But what that does over that length is it creates a nice little stage opportunity on the north end. So you see a relationship from the entry plaza across the street, across Santa Fe, and on this side, that plaza extension can become a stage event for a programmed event. So it becomes a nice little amphitheater space that isn't so steep or something that you can't use it for festivals. So west of the line can be a more contemplative part of the park where you can have shady sitting areas and places for smaller group gatherings or even picnic, weddings, that sort of thing. We've carefully integrated the current gazebo that's outside of the building now in its location, so we don't want to take expense to move that, but the idea is that it would be in a straddled position between those two environments so that it creates a great place to have a wedding ceremony or high school photographs or whatever you might want to do in that gazebo and have two different environments that could support those activities.
Well, I was hoping, and you don't have any of this indicated on the flybys that we saw.
No.
No, this is depicted on the flyby, which I understand that's a long ways down the road. I understand that completely.
Yeah, we've been a little shyer about some of those graphics.
Well, and one of the other things, as Craig mentioned, is public engagement. So although we've done this master plan, our intent, as the county has talked to us, is going out to the public and having conversations and getting some input. So those things need to happen as we continue to develop it.
Well, it's a great concept. I'm very excited about this. That'll be a great part of it when it's all said and done.
Yeah.
And I'd like
to be a game changer downtown. Really.
I like the little three-step platform you have the main level of the courthouse on. Floor plan relationships to the new courthouse to the city hall. X feet higher, lower, or
Oh, I'm sorry. Say that again.
floor elevations of the new courthouse relative to city hall.
So the new courthouse is set at an elevation of, it's called 32.
Okay,
And the street elevation on Santa Fe is about 29.
okay,
When you get to the corner of 29 in Kansas, it's about 28.
Okay.
And then it starts to drop pretty quick.
okay.
So if you recall, driving down Kansas, it doesn't feel steep when you drive it, but it's actually about 10 feet of fall. So it does create a position where northbound, that the building sits in a bigger, more robust landscape, and that's why the building's splaying away like that. It really helps.
Great, that's not like that. One more question, technical question. I thought I noticed, is that a functioning balcony on the 7th floor on the east side, or is that just kind of a visual thing?
It's not a functioning balcony, it's just a roof.
Just a roof.
The jury deliberation rooms don't go all the way up, so that's just captured space for a roof.
Thank you.
Chairman, I would like to respond to something that Commissioner Schaefer pointed out on the green space. I'd like Brad to talk to what's included in the budget and what's not as it relates to the green space.
Yeah.
Just to clarify.
So, Penny, I don't know if you're asking dollar amount, but we do have an allocation or what scope is included in the green space. So,
Could you speak to the scope or what will be part of the green space upon completion of the courthouse, rather than what might happen 5, 10, 15 years down the road?
well, it's pretty basic landscaping is what we have anticipated with what we have budgeted for within the courthouse project. So it certainly includes demolition of the current courthouse plus, landscaping, some level of landscaping, but probably on a flat plane with some sidewalks and other improvements that might be needed. So pretty basic, but there are some opportunities there down the road.
Other questions? All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very impressed with the work so far. And facility staff and Danny, good job. So the next time you'll be before us will be in what capacity, Brad?
I believe late June will be coming forward with the first GMP, I think one of 2 guaranteed maximum price contracts to get them started doing site work, utilities. I'm not sure if I'm missing anything. The tunnel, I believe. So there'll be a GMP, guaranteed maximum price contract amendment to get construction started, be groundbreaking, and shortly after that, a week or 2 later in July.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, thank you very much. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you, good job.